I found myself in debt for the second time in my life. There was still shame, there was still overwhelm, there was still this feeling of like, I can't move on in my life until I figure out how to fix this. And your community was there in the forefront. I thought maybe there's something here that I don't know that I don't know. At my darkest season, I definitely was defined by money.
What is it that you want to teach your kids about money?
So I'm currently
Download as a complimentary gift from me to you my ebook called The Financial Freedom Formula 5 Steps to Decrease Debt, Increase Your Income, and Save Money. Welcome, Rosie. So glad to have you here today to talk about just your journey and all the things that you've been able to realize, to work on, and to start, creating and manifesting, which is very exciting. So I would love to know if we'll just kind of do a timeline of events. What for you do you feel like was maybe some of your biggest challenges with money and maybe even also in your wellness journey prior to joining our community?
Yeah, so thank you for having me. I've been really looking forward to chatting with you. So leading up to me joining the community, I found myself in debt for the second time in my life. And what was interesting to me with this time around was that this debt was chosen. There was a medical emergency, and I needed to use my savings to take 12 weeks off. And I knew that I knew what I was going to get into. I knew how many credit cards I had. I even knew the debt I was going to be um, looking at. And it blew my mind that afterwards, after I was able to go back to work and start establishing like a way of paying back and all the things, I found myself feeling the same way that I did the first time I went into debt. And that first time I went into debt was just like mistakes, right? I made bad choices. I just rolled into that. And so there was still shame. There was still overwhelm. There was still this feeling of like, I can't move on in my life until I figure out how to fix this. So, very black and white thinking around how I was spending my money. If it wasn't going to the debt, there was shame around that. So then I found your community and I thought, well, I've paid off debt before. The first time I paid off the debt in 9 months, and I was successful in doing all of that. Um, but for some reason, I was like, something was like tugging at me, and your community was there in the forefront. And I thought, maybe there's something here that I don't know that I don't know. So I wanted to join and also look at why I was feeling this same way when it was chosen debt, right? So that was what brought me to the community originally. Yeah.
Wow. And I feel this so hard just because I think some life experiences you hear about and you know of, but they don't really hit until maybe you experience it. And just like with my husband having a stroke earlier this year, completely unexpected and regardless of where you are financially, like it could take a toll. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
and so I think that you talking about that probably is going to hit home with a lot of folks because we all struggle with unexpected things happening out of nowhere that we have to figure out how to deal with. And your health is number one, right? So, whatever it is that you need to do in order to support healing and growing and like taking the time off, like how are you supposed to heal if you don't take the
Mhm.
time away to rest and like recover? And so, kudos to you for not being like, well, I'm gonna have to figure out how to go back in 4 weeks or whatever, right? Like, I think we're so used to just being on the hamster wheel and grinding and try to just show up and push through. Um, and sometimes it doesn't lead to like detrimental outcomes in the short term, but I feel like it has to in the long term. So for you to slow yourself down and make that choice consciously, like thank your past self for that, right? Because I assume that even today you're benefiting from that choice that you made there in
Oh, yeah.
ways, right? That maybe like financially you had to like rebuild, but that's life, you know? And so when we talk about mindset, which I'm excited to hear kind of like some of the unlocks and realizations that you had, is that sometimes we have to reframe things for ourselves and allow ourselves to reflect and be self-aware to know what's coming up and what's going on and what we need to switch out. Because sometimes we need to switch out definitions, sometimes we need to switch out beliefs, sometimes we need to switch out, feelings and thoughts about certain things. But again, in a very noisy world, especially maybe in the personal finance space where there's a lot of a specific narrative around things, I think it can be challenging to have the space and time and the quiet to know like your voice as opposed to the voices of like the gurus and what you're supposed to do. I think people are probably going to want to know like how did you pay off the debt the first time if you're willing to share, because there's so many people listening that are like, how do I pay off debt?" So
Yeah.
you became debt free, once before. Like what was it that you did in order to make that happen?
So at the time, what happened for me was that I got a new job, and with that new job came a new pay rate. And so, since I was used to the previous pay rate, I just used the difference to pay off the debt. I might have added a little bit, just to give us a little bit, some wiggle room or whatever was on the kind of funds list. But for the most part, I hadn't yet got used to that new bump, so I used it to pay off the debt, and that's how I was able to pay it off. It took me 9 months at the time.
Love it. And it's such a good testament to being able to shift into who you have to be in order to hit your goals, because there of course there's things that you have to do, like they actually make the payments and show up to work and whatever the case is in order to have the outcome, which is what we usually focus on when we talk about goal setting, right? I want to be debt free. But then it's like, how do we reverse engineer that? Because there's plenty of people who get a raise and still don't know where any of their money is going, and
Mhm.
still don't, feel like they're making progress in being able to pay down debt or save or invest. And so, for you to be able to say you just kept yourself around the
Mhm.
same lifestyle, and maybe there were certain areas that you allotted for more space or for some more give, but
Right.
having this goal, really being focused on working toward that, which when I think about it, little did you know that like life would happen later, that making that choice then would set you up for less of a headache. Like, was it still a headache to have the medical situation come up and then have to choose to go back into debt and so on and so forth? Of course. But when I think about like my husband having had the stroke and like the fall, like it's been like 6 months and still life is a doozy.
Mhm.
But thinking about what would it have been like if we hadn't paid our debt off prior to all of this, I think it might have been a lot more stressful. I think it might have been a lot more to think about, a lot more on our plate. So you having cleared your debt at that time so that you had the bandwidth and capacity, so that you had the credit available or whatever the case was,
Mhm.
right? Um, kind of set you up for success when life inevitably happened again. Like we all have to know in one way or another, life is going to happen. The car, the house, the dog, medical, like our kids, something is going to happen. Okay, friends, we just have to get used to that. And how well are we setting ourselves up for being able to manage those situations? Okay. So you got focused, you got a raise, which I love because I also think, of course, frugality has a place in personal finance, but I think that there's such like, like be frugal, cut back. And it's like at some point, you can only cut back so much. Like,
Yeah,
you,
and it was the stage in life too. Like, for example, I was newly divorced. I had two children at the time. They were young enough that I could do all the things, look for the free resources, go to the library, do all the things, right? Their needs weren't where their needs are, happen to be later on in life. Um, and so it was one experience. And then 10 years later, when I'm in debt now, I have older children, college age, young adults. There's three of them now. Um, you know, so it looked different, but what was cemented was that I knew I could do it. I had done it
Mm,
once before. I knew I could do it. It was just a matter of figuring out what that would look like this time around. And like you said, just also being clear with my value, choosing to go into the debt because at the time I didn't know what other resources to tap into, honestly.
mm,
Now I probably might approach it a little differently, but like, tapped into the savings, tapped into the credit cards, and knowing that for me being able to be home and be a caretaker for 12 weeks was worth it. Like, and I would do it again. I would do
Mm.
it again.
Okay. So then you cleared the debt. It gave you to some level the confidence to be able to know, okay, if I go back into the debt, I can figure this out somehow. But then it sounds like you were surprised when it happened that some of the things came up that did. For you, how is it that, after joining our community, what was that like trying to unpack that stuff or whatever it was that came up for you after the fact?
Yeah. So one of the things that you had said to me at the time was basically like, well, what is our emergency savings for? Right? If not to use it in an emergency. And that's what I had to kind of keep reminding myself was that the relationship to debt also I had to look at, right? The shame around it, whatever my stories were. And then I had to kind of just remember, well, what was I taught about being in debt? What was I taught about having enough savings? All the stories that I had heard, all the conversations and comments I had heard, and the belief systems that I had um, from growing up. And is that still true? Like, for example, because I am in debt, is it true that I am irresponsible? I would say no, because I chose to stay home to caretake for one of my children for 12 weeks. That was the option. It was that or debt. I went with the value of I'm going to show up in this capacity as a mother, and this is what I'm going to do for my child. And so I had to get really clear with what my value system was and just let go of everything else because it was it wasn't serving me and it was not helping the situation, and quite frankly I was just feeling really sort of depressed about the whole thing and not wanting to um spend money on life, on fun stuff if it wasn't going to the debt, right? That if for me in my head, if it wasn't going to the debt, that's when I was being irresponsible because I wasn't hurrying up and paying off
Mm.
the debt. And so once I got clear that my decision was in line with my values, I was able to let go of that kind of negative self-talk around like whatever I was feeling that I shouldn't have been in debt in the first place. And so that was one step. And also to remind myself, and you reminded me several times, that that was what the emergency that I had been putting away for. It was an emergency. It was granted. It didn't look like a house or a car for the family. It wasn't something that was as visible and that we could see for the next 10, 15, 20 years. But it was still just as valuable, it was still part of my value system. So that was helpful as well. And then along with identifying my values, it was like, well, what type of life do I want to live right now? And who says that I shouldn't get to do that simply because I am in debt? Like, why am I punishing myself or why am I taking that from myself, right? Like, I shouldn't have to feel like I get to have less value out of my life because I'm in debt. And so when I was able to kind of see it that way and identify how do I want to feel, what do I want to do, and how can I be responsibly doing all these things, paying off the debt and showing up for my life, and what would that look like for me? Even if like I'm not doing all the things, but maybe I'm picking one or two of the things for now so that I'm feeling alive, like we get to still be able to show up for our lives and enjoy it. And so for me, what I chose was travel, was I wasn't going to give up on traveling. I'd rather give up the coffee. I'd rather give up the going to the movies. I'd rather give up, all the other things that where money was going, and choose travel as a value alongside with making a plan for paying off the debt.
So good. So juicy. There's so many directions. I don't even know where to begin. Very excited. But I guess we're gonna start working backwards because you mentioned choosing travel as a value. everyone has different values when it comes to money, and this is why I say you want to assess your spending, because you do it whether you know or not. Like,
Mhm,
where your money is going blatantly shows what you value. And being able to do that instead of what we usually do is kind of default to someone else's value system with money, because someone else said this is what you're supposed to do in whatever order, which is a value, that's a value decision, right? And a framework for filtering how you interact with money. Everyone has to, you wear glasses, I wear glasses too, right? We all have to wear our own glasses and come up with a lens for our own way of managing our money. Now,
mhm,
obviously, all of the different ways that are out there to manage money are great options to begin with and kind of get the lay of the land on like what you can do. But then you're supposed to end up customizing to your own life. And this is why it's kind of challenging, like over the years, kind of talking more and more about personal finance and feeling like there is no one size fits all model. Like,
mhm,
one way of dealing with personal finance is not going to fit for everyone. What we should be teaching people is how to create that decision making model. How
mhm,
do you take the time to look at your specific life and say, well, what is it that I value, and what do I in this season, like you mentioned,
mhm,
want to make a priority, knowing that seasons change,
mhm,
and that if you're creating a sustainable plan, a plan that's going to cover you in the long term, you're going to get to those other things if you're operating in possibility, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, right?
mhm,
Because on my debt free journey, and I think in a lot of the personal finance space, of course, yes, we want to get rid of the debt sooner rather than later because, one, maybe it's eating up our cash flow. Two, we have a lot of emotional connection and attachment to the debt. So we were trying to hurry up and get out of this feeling. But then I came to a point where I realized to some extent that some of that is living in scarcity. Like,
mhm.
dealing with our debt and scarcity, that we're like, we need to hurry because
Right.
urgency to some extent comes from a place of scarcity, depending on like the intention behind it. And so for you to kind of see all of that and then say, okay, well, let me look at my own life, like where and what is it that is going to feel the most aligned for me, as opposed to you just trying to take a cookie cutter approach and fit yourself, conform into a way of dealing with money that someone else said what it's supposed to be. um it sounds like led to, over time, obviously, right, more peace and you being able to still make memories with your family that you find valuable and that you cherish. I think one of the things that you hit on, that you said it and I thought about the word and then you said the word that I was thinking. So I was like, ooh, yeah, alignment.
Mhm,
Um, where did we learn that we needed to be punished? You know what I mean? Like, what if we went into debt and that's a bad thing,
mhm.
then we need to be punished for it by not enjoying
Right.
life.
Right.
And it's like, you said the question, which everyone needs to ask themselves about their beliefs, is it true now? So
Mhm,
maybe that was true at some point. Maybe, the belief served a function in a season of your life, but we always want to bring ourselves to where we are in the current moment and ask, is this thing true now? Do I want this thing to be true now? Or what could you replace it with? And we talk about replacing some of the lies we tell ourselves and things like that. But oh, so many good pieces in there.
And on a practical note, like the approach to that started in our community, in this community. I followed the budget, right? And then I had so much anxiety over sitting with a budget, but I did it. I I approached it like um I'm just going to I'm just going to take it on like I'm learning something new. And I would sit every week with it. And I created my budget. And first, I was tracking my money spending with the apps to see where everything would fall. And then after a couple of months, I was able to make decisions like, okay, this still applies. This one I can let go of. And so it took a few months first of fine tuning and figuring out what the plan was going to be and working with you all. Um, and then once I was clear and making those choices, I was able to then like start moving forward as far as like I said, I got a plan for the debt and I was buying tickets for travel. It's like,
Listen.
let me send the payment to the debt payoff, and then let me buy my plane ticket.
I remember you like sending us pictures. I think it was you and your son when you guys
Yeah,
were you in Jamaica or something
we
like
were in
that.
Jamaica, yeah.
And so it's like just really fun. I remember you talking about you went on a cruise. I think you just did some fun things and regardless of our financial situation, we deserve to enjoy our lives. Now, it's interesting because it's not even balance, it's harmony. You have to find a harmony, obviously, in creating a plan that includes us enjoying our life. You're not just sitting here saying, "Well, I'm gonna travel. I don't care whether I had a mother or not." You had a plan, so you're still working a plan, but the plan included the experiences that you wanted to enjoy. And I think that's the biggest piece is that a lot of the time even if we don't like the word budget, because we hate the word budget, we just throw out the idea of a plan altogether.
Mhm,
And I think that's kind of like shooting yourself in the foot because we don't really how many things can we do without a plan? A tentative one, because plans always change, but like
mm,
just an idea of a direction that we want to go
right.
in. The word budget means guesstimate. So we have to know that it's going to have to be flexible and things are going to ebb and flow. But having a tentative idea of what's going on that starts with the foundation of information. So, like you said, you just had to figure out where money was going for a little bit before you even
Mhm,
could make empowered decisions. Because
right.
I think people, again, from this sense of urgency, we're jumping to try to tell our money what to do without getting to know it first. And I
Mm,
talk about money like a person because it kind of helps to better understand that relationship. We talk about having a relationship with money. If someone just met you or someone has been treating you a certain way for however much time, and then all of a sudden they're trying to act different towards you, you're gonna be like,
mhm.
excuse me, ma'am. You think you're gonna come in here and you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
you have to think about it that way, and
sure.
so for you to take the time to invest and I would say to some extent healing your relationship with money because you were inquiring about it, you were looking at it, you were trying to think about it differently, you're asking it questions, like this is like a relationship like with a person, you know what I mean? Like how would you heal a relationship with a human being? And what are those qualities and characteristics and things that you would do? And then how can you transfer that into your money journey? And then by the time you have gotten to a certain place with your money, now you know it better. Now you've asked some questions and things, you've spent time with it. Now it's like, hey, can we collaborate? So I used to be guilty, taking control of my finances. Like we hear so often, like taking control of our finances. And I think I've been in a controlling relationship personally.
Mhm, mhm.
I ain't never going back to a controlling relationship. That was not fun.
Right.
You know what I
That's
mean?
not
Like,
fun, right.
it's not fun. And so it's like, does money want to be in a relationship with me if I'm trying to control it all the time? Or do we need to switch out control for collaboration? And then
Mhm,
we get to a place where we try to figure out how to collaborate with our money and we're working for it obviously because we have jobs and things but we also are asking it to work for us in a way that makes sense, so I just love it because your journey is including all the pieces that help to kind of hit on like yes there's the practical like you sat down with a budget you looked at where things went da, 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 but it's also doing the inner work the awareness and asking yourself these harder questions about like where's all this coming from and what do I want it to be.
yeah, the black and white thinking,
Mm.
was so hard to get past. It was so hard to get past, but I would say that that was one of the biggest things that I was able to heal just in relating to money specifically. And of course, I am of the belief that how you do one thing is how you do all things. And so it wasn't just in my relationship to money, but that's where I started to see it. And then I could start to see it in other areas of my life where that black and white thinking was just not serving me. Mhm.
Oh, so good. I mean, you're not alone. Okay. But the black and white thinking, the very all or nothing kind of
Yeah.
like it has to be this way or this way. So many ladies deal with in our community and just in general, I think. Um, but it's a process. It takes time to unravel and undo. But then the fruits of your labor, like you mentioned, blossom beyond your bank account and you're able to see like how things can grow in different areas of your life. And so I would love to know like you've been in the community for a couple of years now, and we've talked about you
Mhm.
kind of being open to seeing how you can serve in different ways, right? And so recently you've shared just some really cool stuff that's happened as far as your own health journey, and then, naturally what that's looked like as far as being able to expand on service. And so I would love to hear about that, because to us, wealth starts with wellness. And so if you are not well, money doesn't even matter, right? Like, you had to be a caretaker for 12 weeks. You weren't thinking about money. You're thinking about the health of your family member. And so I'd love to hear about some of that, as far as like what has developed in your wellness journey, overall, and how that's shifted into some new possibility things for you.
Yeah, so I've been on a wellness journey for a couple of years now. It wasn't always like a health need. At first,
Mhm.
it was just my relationship to my own body, my relationship to my own health and well-being. And then though, medical issues started creeping up. And then it was like, oh, okay, I really have to look at this. And so um that led me to wanting to substitute. I want to substitute all the medication that I'm now having to take, and not have to take it. In order to do that, I have to work. I'm asking myself, similar to my money journey, how do I work backwards to obtain that goal? And so I'm looking at a lot of healing through food, and that led me to gut health and finding a probiotic. So I started taking Plexus, and it's been 4 or 5 months almost now, where I'm taking the Plexus probiotic. Um, and the healing for this particular um, product is meant to be slow. So this is not a quick fix. This is something that you invest in and that you see over time, some people in a year or two. So I have noticed that my anxiety has subsided, my social anxiety has subsided. I was able to travel to Vegas recently all by myself, and I had no anxiety doing it. My I had severe allergies that kept me from being able to drive sometimes, and I don't have any allergies anymore. I don't even sneeze.
I mean, I remember seeing in your stories
Yeah.
how much your allergies
Oh yeah,
affected
my
you.
face. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. And so many other great things have come from me taking that product. And as I was sharing and how it was just coming through, also like my skin is clear and it's glowing. And so people started like noticing, taking notice. And of course, as you're feeling better in your body, that just comes through, right? And so people started asking, like, what are you doing? And so as I began to share, it kind of led to the business opportunity of Plexus. And so I found myself selling the product to friends and family who were interested, something that I had not even considered doing. And so that led to me going to Plexus Convention, where it was a whole week of listening to higher ups in the company share their own trajectory with Plexus, the business side of it and the health side of it. And there's just like amazing healing stories, folks who have been taking the product for 10 years sometimes. And so on the business front, I saw so much possibility for folks who want to step out of like a typical 9 to 5 job and have freedom, and making an income. And so that just gave me a sense of wanting to sort of like see what that would look like for me. And I'm in a season of life where I've given myself permission to be curious, and I'm not necessarily making decisions right off the bat. Like I'm trying things on, seeing how it feels, allowing myself to pivot, or if I know in my body and in my intuition that this isn't for me, then that's fine too. But until I do, I'm allowing myself to kind of play and see how things feel when I'm trying it on. And so that's what I'm doing right now, specifically with Plexus, but it allows for the possibility. One of the things that I really took away from being at convention is that being able to speak life, just like these women shared their own story of their trajectory with Plexus. One day I'm going to have a story, and I want to be able to share the possibility with other women, just the possibility of the fact that sharing our stories inspires other people to possibly go after their own desires, their own little glimpses of what they might see possible. And sometimes, you know, where I want to speak life into is those little possibilities that creep up that we say, oh no, but XYZ, we can't do it. Oh no, but I'm too busy. Oh no, but it's not the right time. And so that is what is exciting me right now, as far as like speaking possibility, playing with the possibility of seeing where this goes, sharing health with other folks, especially as it relates to gut health. And listen, it doesn't have to be the probiotic that I'm taking, but I encourage everybody to look at their own health and see what can be benefiting you by taking, whether it's a probiotic or anything else that your body might be needing that maybe we haven't. Some people are, if I ask them, are you taking a multivitamin? Maybe they're not yet. And so there's so many areas that we want to look at and consider for ourselves. And as long as we're doing that to support ourselves wholly, right? And then we're honoring ourselves.
Mm,
When we begin to honor ourselves, it starts trickling, like not just our health, not just our bodies, but then now our mental health, and then the way we're showing up for life, and then our relationships. And so that's what I'm experiencing right now, as I'm saying yes to the things that are sort of like making their way into my life. Like, huh, okay, let's see. So it's kind of like my season of, I wouldn't call it like yes. Some things are a vibrant yes, right? But like of curiosity.
mm, mm. Rosie, the speaker, the coach, the entrepreneur, you're speaking possibility right now. And I think, you're saying one day I'll have a story. You already do. Like, you're living it every single day. You've already had the changes that you've had occur since making decisions to honor yourself. And I love that you put it that way, because so many women, I talk a lot about like money and financial wellness, the conversation around confidence comes up so often. And I think that you can lack confidence because you don't honor yourself. And so, how are you? Because confidence, essentially, right? If you look at the definition, is trust and appreciation. If you don't trust yourself and you don't appreciate yourself, you're not going to feel confident. And so, the more that you honor yourself, that means that you're showing up for yourself. That means that you're being reliable to yourself. That means you're being trustworthy and can trust your own word to
Mhm,
yourself. We get a lot into the habit of being able to show up for other people
mhm,
and to give and give and give and give and give and make sure everyone else is cool, which is not a bad thing. But that then sometimes we leave nothing for ourselves, and then we're the last, on the list. um and that can be detrimental depending on the season of your life and whatnot. And so it's like, for you to be able to invest in yourself monetarily, time, energy, and effort makes you a great example for your kids. And if, especially if it's your health or something like that, right? Like, your kids want you around. So the healthier you are, the more fun you are to have around, the more things you can do together, the more clear-headed you are to advise them and support them. And so I think sometimes we think that we can't invest in ourselves until X, Y, and Z or whatever. And it's like, investing in yourself, whatever that might look like, should be a priority and a prerequisite to open the doors to so many other things. And I just appreciate you, because I remember having a conversation and you were just talking through, you know what I mean? Like, what was coming to you. And maybe it didn't feel very clear, but it was very clear to me when you were saying you want, to help people to see possibility and live in possibility, entertain being curious and saying yes to certain things, or at least like giving something a try, right? Like, my kid's a toddler now, and I'm sure I've got a 12-year-old as well. You've got kids that are a little bit older, and you know, they start out really open to trying things that might fail. They're not
Mhm.
even thinking about
Right.
they're not they're not thinking about the end. They're not thinking about the outcome. They
Mhm.
have an impulse or an idea, they kinda run with it. Sometimes that's great, sometimes we're like, "Get off the counter." No, and so I think somewhere we down the line, we kinda get that beaten out of us,
Mhm.
and we get taught to take the safe route and to be really calculated and to avoid risk at all costs, and obviously there's a time and place for that, but again, that's where that all or nothing kind of thinking comes in, where it's like, I can't take any risk. I have to stay safe 100% of the time. And, you having that conversation with me, which is one of the fun things about being able to coach and just know women like you that are absolutely amazing, is like, I get affected by the things that, you experience and you evolve and you share, because that possibility thing has stuck with me since we had that conversation. And so instead of when an opportunity comes up, we get presented with an opportunity and we automatically kind of shut it down,
Mhm.
almost especially when it's something that's exciting, which is
Mhm.
weird. Um because we're like, there's no way. And instead of following that line of thinking, for myself at least, I can say, because of our conversation, I've learned to slow myself down in that, observe what's happening, and then ask myself, like, well, if this is something that I would really like to see where it could lead, instead of I can't or it's impossible, thinking what if or how can I,
Mhm.
you know? And that's how my journey started, was like, I'm in all of this debt. I was like, okay, what was I could have been, all right, well, it's over for me. It's like, well, what if? What if you were able to get on a plan and figure things out? And that's what it sounds like you've done in your journey too. And so for anyone who feels like, either on the health side of things or just wanting to have a breakthrough in your own way of thinking, limiting beliefs, or even you're just like, I want to go to the next level in what I think might be possible for me, I would highly suggest, being able to check out Rosie, and reaching out and saying, hey, I love the podcast and this is what resonated with me, because you could decide not to share your journey with us. And that's why I'm so gracious for you to even be willing to and open to talk about what's going on. And I think the more people that can find what parts of their journey they're okay with sharing, right? We don't have to overshare, share like every single detail, but it's like, what are you okay with sharing for the purpose of being able to contribute to the collective? Because you just never know. You never know how that's gonna help someone. Like, you started taking Plexus, it affected your life. You weren't intending to sell anything, but it's like people
Mm-mm.
are watching, but people are in pain. They're
Mhm.
struggling. They're dealing with allergies the way you're dealing with allergies.
Mhm.
They're dealing with social anxiety, that they don't even talk to people about, or issues or problems that they don't even talk to people about. And so for you to be able to kind of share and show up in a way, and like you said, it may not be this, but how can you start exploring what's going on and looking for alternative solutions, I think is key. So I appreciate for you for how you show up in the world, and I'm watching and I'm listening and I'm like, you know what? I need to do me a little health check. Let's see what's going on here.
Yeah.
It's ongoing. It's never ending. We're like plants. You can't just water your plant once and be like, see you in 2029.
Right. Right. And, our value is not defined um by how much we save or how much we have invested or how much we've planned from A
Mm,
through Z. It's about living our life from our values. Once we're able to identify those and building a legacy and finding resources or possibilities that support that, whatever that is for you, whatever that is for me. And that's what I hope that people can start to maybe consider for themselves. That's what I've been considering for myself. What would that look like? What does that look like if I, like you said, instead of saying no, I can't, um, hmm, maybe, what would that look like?
so good. Okay, I've got two questions.
Yeah.
One, what is it that you want to teach your kids about money?
So I'm currently teaching them. I'll tell you a quick little story. My son got into Berkeley School of Music,
What?
and he's been there. He's a junior. But when he got in, his first thing was, "Mom, it's 50 grand a year. I don't want to be in debt that much by the time I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, do you feel that this school is going to give you the value that you need for what you want to do, what you want to pursue after college? And
Right.
he's like, yeah, I think this is like the best place that I can go. But like, I'm so scared of this debt. I'm so scared of these finances. And I said, well, I think that we just need to say yes to the opportunity. You auditioned, you got in, you were, that's already a step in the door. The door is opening. I think we need to say yes, and we'll have to come up with a plan as we go. Like we'll figure it out as we go for the rest of it. And so that was him going into freshman year, almost about to say no to this opportunity because of money. And so I just said to him, I've had to kind of survive by money. I didn't get the opportunity to do what I wanted to do based on the freedom of like my passion, right? And so I really want this for you. I will find a way to help you pay it off if that's what it comes down to, right? We will find a way. We'll worry about that part later. So now he finished junior year. He's done so many things musically in these 3 years. And I happened to ask him the other day. So now thinking back to your freshman self, do you think that the debt that you're gonna have at the end of this has been worth your journey so far? And he's like, oh, 100%. I'm not even worried about the money anymore, right? So I would just want, I'm teaching my kids to be responsible about their money choices, but not let the money be their guide.
Mm.
Especially like if that's what something that's in your heart. I truly, truly believe that when we start to say yes to the possibilities that light us up,
Mhm.
that resources start to come in. Money is not everything. There's so many other forms of provision that it's not just money, right? It can be um, a free cruise. It could be somebody inviting you to a show, it could be somebody by way of donation. It could be whatever it is. The moment you start saying yes to the thing that lights you up the most is what's going to open up the resources for more possibilities. And it's just like a chain, a link. You say yes to this thing, then the next thing opens up. But it can be scary to like my son Diego, it could be scary to walk through that when we're thinking about money.
Mm.
Um, money, it like you were saying in the beginning, it's almost like it could be an entity and we
Right.
all have a relationship to it, whatever that relationship has been and however it's been shaped in our mind and throughout the years. And so just like anything else, it does require looking at that and asking ourselves, is it serving us? Because I truly believe that there is enough for everybody. There's more than enough for everybody. And the more of us saying yes to life, to the opportunities, to the resources, the more other people can see that it's possible for them too.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so, so good. So good. There's a book called You Squared. I don't know if you've ever read it.
No.
Oh my goodness. I'm gonna send it to you when we get
Okay.
off of here. And it's everything that you're talking about. And it's kind of like universal law. Like the truth is the truth is the truth, right?
Right.
And so in the book it's called Unforeseen Forces. So when you're quantum leaping, because that's what the book is about,
Mm-hmm.
you jump and everything comes together for you in the process. And it may not look like the way that you would plan, but things have a way of coming together beyond our conscious way of understanding. Okay, so then there was that question. The next question is, what would you say to yourself in like your darkest or most challenging season when it came to dealing with your finances? You've talked about shame and just stress and things like that. Like where you are now, what would you say to yourself then, looking back?
Oh, well, just along the lines of what I've said already, that money does not define my value. At my darkest season, I definitely was defined by money and what I had and what I didn't, and all those things. And so I would just say that life will offer so many more resources. A paycheck is just one of them.
Mm,
And at the end of the day, for me, God is my mentor says God is the source and everything else is a resource.
mm,
And that's how I've seen things now. A paycheck, money, um, food, it's all resources. So my darkest time was definitely because I was being defined by this value of finances, of monetary, and now I feel that the wealth that I hold has nothing to do with money, actually, right?
mm,
And it has more to do with the juiciness of which I bring to my life and that I feel about um, in just showing up every day and wanting to make a difference and wanting to build a legacy by way of who I am and what I say and how people hear me.
mm. Rosie, thank you so much for just being here today, showing up for yourself, showing up for others, and I'm grateful to know you. I'm excited to be able to continue to watch things blossom and unfold and what that possibility looks like. I have to thank you personally because I swear it affects me, and I do my best to remind myself of that all the time. But it's just a pleasure to know you and to get to watch your journey evolve. And I appreciate you endlessly for for just being who you are.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be able to sit here today and talk with you. I feel like it's literally been the couple of years that I've been in the community in the making to be able to step into this version of myself and have this conversation with you. So I appreciate you too. Thank you.